Have you ever seen a man celebrate his own funeral? Harrison Blackwood did. He walked out of the Supreme Court of New York with a smirk that could cut glass. He had the Porsche, the penthouse on 57th Street, and full control of the tech empire he built. He left his wife, Claire, with nothing but a settlement check she didn't even look at. He thought he had won the war. But Harrison forgot the most important rule of power: never mistake silence for defeat. He didn't know that the judge, the bank, and even the pavement he walked on were owned by the man in the shadows, his father-in-law. And by the time Harrison stopped smiling, it was already too late. The ink on the divorce decree was barely dry when Harrison Blackwood ordered the bottle of 1959 Dom Perignon. He sat in the corner booth of Le Coucou in Manhattan, the kind of place where the lighting was dim enough to hide sins, but bright enough to catch the shimmer of a Rolex Daytona. Across from him sat Jessica, 24 years old, with eyes the color of aggressive ambition and a dress that cost more than Harrison's first car. "To freedom," Harrison said, clinking his glass against hers. The crystal rang out, a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the low hum of conversation. "To keep the company," Jessica corrected with a playful wink, taking a sip. "I still can't believe she didn't fight for Vertex." Harrison leaned back, loosening his tie. "Claire never had the stomach for a fight, Jess. She's soft. She likes her watercolor painting and her charity galas for stray greyhounds. She thought if she played the dignified victim, I'd feel guilty and hand over equity. Please. I built Vertex Systems from a basement in Queens to $1 billion valuation. It's mine." He wasn't entirely wrong about the history, but he was dead wrong about the mechanics. Harrison was the face of Vertex, the charismatic CEO who could sell ice to an Eskimo. But the infrastructure, the seed capital, the regulatory hurdles that miraculously vanished in 2018? That was murky, but Harrison preferred the version of the story where he was the sole architect of his destiny. "I saw her father in the hallway, though," Jessica said, frowning slightly as she picked at her lobster. "That old guy, Arthur. He looked weird." Harrison laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Arthur Sterling? The man is a fossil. He spends his days playing bridge at the St. Regis and complaining about the weather. He hasn't been relevant since the steel crash in the 80s. He looked weird because he knows his little princess is out of the castle and he's too old to do anything about it." Harrison checked his phone. A notification from his lawyer, Beatrice Thorne, one of the sharpest sharks at Cravath, Swain and Moore. Text: "Decree finalized. Asset transfer complete. Vertex is 100% yours. Wire for the alimony initiated. Congratulations, Harry." He showed the screen to Jessica. "Done. The alimony is a lot, $5 million lump sum, but it's a small price to pay to sever the limb. I'm a free agent." $5 million? Jessica's eyes widened. "That's a lot of shopping." "It's hush money," Harrison said dismissively. "It keeps Arthur from grumbling and keeps Claire in watercolor paints for the rest of her life. Now let's order dessert. I want to celebrate." As they laughed, Harrison didn't notice the man sitting 3 tables away. He was wearing a nondescript grey suit, nursing a sparkling water. He wasn't eating, he was just watching. And every time Harrison laughed, the man tapped a singular finger against the linen tablecloth. Harrison paid the bill, $4,200 including tip, and walked out into the crisp New York autumn air. He felt lighter than air. He had traded a 40-year-old wife who asked too many questions for a 24-year-old who only asked for his credit card. He had retained 100% of his company stock. He was untouchable. He tossed the keys to the valet. "The Aston Martin, bring it around." The valet, a young kid named Leo, who usually sprinted for Harrison, hesitated. He looked down at his clipboard, then back at Harrison with a pale face. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm sorry." "Sorry for what? Did you scratch it?" Harrison's mood darkened instantly. "No, sir. The system... It says the car has been flagged for repossession." Harrison froze. "Repossession? Are you insane? I bought that car 3 years ago. There's no line on it." "I don't know, sir," Leo stammered, holding up the tablet. "The registration is flagged by Sterling and Associates Leasing. They put a boot on it 10 minutes ago. It's in the back lot." Harrison felt a cold prickle on the back of his neck. Sterling and Associates. The name was generic enough. It could be anyone. But the coincidence gnawed at him. "This is a mistake," Harrison snapped. "Call an Uber, Jessica. I'm going to make a phone call." He dialed his lawyer, Beatrice. It went to voicemail. He dialed his CFO, Greg. "Greg, why is there a hold on the Aston?" Greg's voice was shaky. "Harrison, I was just about to call you. We have a problem with the payroll accounts." "What problem?" Harrison hissed, pacing the sidewalk. "Chase froze them. An hour ago. They cited a compliance audit triggered by a Section 404 notice." "Section 404? That's internal controls. Who triggered it?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Greg?" "It came from the Minority Shareholder Oversight Committee, Harrison." "I don't have minority shareholders. I own 100% of the voting stock." "Not exactly," Greg whispered. "Remember the Series A round? The Angel Group from the Cayman Islands? The one that provided the bridge loan in 2019? You signed a waiver granting them emergency oversight if the CEO's personal liability exceeded a certain threshold. The divorce settlement, that $5 million hit, it triggered the clause." Harrison stopped pacing. The street noise of Manhattan seemed to fade into a dull roar. "Who controls the Cayman Group, Greg? We never knew. It was a blind trust." "Find out!" Harrison screamed, startling a passing couple. "Find out who they are!" He hung up, his heart hammering against his ribs. He looked at the restaurant. The man in the grey suit was walking out. He stopped in front of Harrison. He didn't look like a threat. He looked like a grandfather. "Mr. Blackwood," the man said softly. He had a British accent, refined and clipped. "Who are you?" "My name is Mr. Kincaid. I'm Arthur Sterling's personal actuary." Harrison scoffed, though his hands were trembling. "Arthur sent his accountant to scare me. Tell the old man the divorce is final. Double jeopardy or whatever. He can't touch me." Mr. Kincaid smiled. It was a smile devoid of any warmth. It was the smile of a mortician admiring a fresh cadaver. "Mr. Sterling didn't send me to scare you, Harrison. He sent me to inform you that your lease is up." "I don't lease anything. I own everything." "You own nothing," Kincaid said, his voice dropping an octave. "You never did. You were simply managing the portfolio while you were part of the family." "Good evening." Kincaid stepped into a waiting black Lincoln Town car. As the door closed, Harrison's phone buzzed. It was a notification from his bank. Alert. Personal checking ending in 8890. Balance $0. Status: frozen litigation hold. Harrison stared at the phone. He looked at Jessica, who was waiting by the curb, scrolling through Instagram, oblivious. The war hadn't ended in that courtroom. It had just begun, and Harrison had walked onto the battlefield without a weapon. The next morning, Harrison stormed into the Vertex headquarters in Dumbo, Brooklyn. The open plan office, usually buzzing with the frantic energy of coders and sales reps, was eerily quiet. He marched past the reception desk. "Where is everyone?" he barked at the receptionist, a new hire named Sarah. "Mr. Blackwood," she squeaked. "Server maintenance. IT shut everything down at 8 a.m. "I didn't authorize maintenance." Harrison pushed through the glass doors of the server room. It was empty. The lights were off. The humming of the cooling fans, the heartbeat of his company, was silent. Standing in the dark, illuminated only by the blue LEDs of the dormant racks, was Greg, his CFO. Greg was sitting on the floor, his head in his hands. "Greg, turn the damn servers back on. We have the Amazon demo at noon." Greg looked up. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. "I can't, Harrison. The servers aren't ours." Harrison felt that same cold prickle from the night before, now spreading down his spine. "What are you talking about? I paid $2 million for this hardware last year." "No," Greg said, standing up slowly. "You paid $2 million to Solstice Infrastructure for a hardware-as-a-service contract to reduce tax liability. You wanted the write-off, remember? You said ownership was for suckers when you could lease and deduct." Harrison remembered. It was a clever accounting trick Beatrice, his lawyer, had suggested. It saved him $600,000 in taxes. "So? Call Solstice. Tell them to turn it on." "Harrison," Greg said, his voice breaking. "Solstice Infrastructure is a subsidiary of Sterling Holdings." Harrison staggered back, hitting the doorframe. "Arthur?" "Arthur?" Greg confirmed. "They invoked a breach of contract clause this morning. Apparently, the moral turpitude clause in the user agreement covers public adultery." "Public adultery?" Harrison screamed. "I'm divorced. I'm a single man." "They have photos, Harrison, timed and dated from before the filing. You and Jessica in Cabo. You and Jessica in the Hamptons. They sent the file to the board of directors of Solstice." Harrison ran a hand through his hair. "This is insane. It's petty. Arthur is destroying his own daughter's inheritance to spite me." "I don't think he cares about the money," Greg whispered. Harrison stormed out of the server room and into his office. He slammed the door and dialed Claire. He needed to hear her voice. He needed to know if she was part of this. It rang 4 times before she picked up. "Hello, Harrison." Her voice was calm, serene even. In the background, he could hear the sound of seagulls. She was at the beach house in Montauk, the one he let her keep because he thought it was a money pit. "Claire, tell your father to stop." "Stop what, Harry?" "He froze my accounts. He repossessed my car. He shut down my company's servers. This is illegal. I will sue him into the ground." "Harrison," Claire sighed, sounding bored. "You wanted a divorce. You said you wanted to stand on your own 2 feet. Daddy is just removing the training wheels." "Training wheels? I built Vertex. Me." "Did you?" Claire asked softly. "Who introduced you to the head of procurement at Google? Who got you the zoning permits for the Brooklyn office? Who covered the legal fees when that patent troll sued you in 2020? "I handled that. Daddy handled that, Harry. He made calls. He called in favors. He smoothed the road so you could drive fast. And you drove fast, Harry. Right away from me. Claire, listen to me. If the Amazon demo doesn't happen at noon, the stock tanks. If the stock tanks, your alimony checks bounce. You're hurting yourself." Claire laughed. It was a genuine, light laugh. "Oh, Harry, do you really think I need your alimony? It's $5 million. My trust fund generates $5 million every quarter, Harry. I only asked for the alimony because Daddy said it would keep you distracted while he moved the pieces on the board." Harrison went silent. The phone felt heavy in his hand. "What pieces?" he whispered. "Good luck with the demo, Harry. I really do hope you figure it out. You're so smart, after all." The line went dead. Harrison stared at the phone. He had 2 hours until the Amazon executives arrived. He had no servers, no money, and his CFO was crying on the floor. He needed a Hail Mary. He grabbed his coat. He was going to see the one person who might have leverage over Arthur Sterling. He was going to see Arthur's estranged brother, Elias Sterling. Elias was the black sheep, the gambler, the one Arthur hated. If anyone knew where the bodies were buried, it was Elias. Harrison ran out of the building. He tried to hail a cab, but his Uber app was linked to the frozen card. He cursed and ran toward the subway. As he swiped his Metro card, the turnstile flashed, insufficient fare. He checked his pockets. No cash. He had stopped carrying cash years ago. He was a billionaire on paper, and he couldn't afford a subway ride. He jumped the turnstile. 2 NYPD officers were standing right there. "Hey, you!" one shouted. Harrison broke into a run. He wasn't thinking. He was operating on pure adrenaline and panic. He sprinted up the stairs, out onto the street, the officers shouting behind him. He turned a corner and collided hard with a pedestrian, sending coffee flying everywhere. "Watch it, jerk!" the man yelled. Harrison scrambled up, straightening his suit. He looked at the man. It was the same man from the restaurant. Mr. Kincaid. Kincaid wasn't holding coffee. He was holding a manila envelope. "Running late, Mr. Blackwood?" Kincaid asked calmly, ignoring the police officers who were now rounding the corner, breathless. "You," Harrison panted. "You set me up." "I'm just the messenger," Kincaid said. He extended the envelope. "Mr. Sterling thought you might need this. It's the original incorporation documents for Vertex Systems." Harrison snatched the envelope. "I have these. I wrote them." "Look at page 14, subsection C," Kincaid said. The police officers grabbed Harrison by the arms. "You're under arrest for theft of services and evading arrest." "Wait!" Harrison yelled, ripping the envelope open as they cuffed him. "Just let me look." He scanned the document. It was his signature. It was his handwriting. But the clause. He didn't remember the clause. Clause 14C. In the event of a dissolution of marriage between the principal, Harrison Blackwood, and a direct descendant of the primary investor, Arthur Sterling, all intellectual property rights, including source code and patents, revert immediately to the primary investor's holding company, Omega Trust. Harrison stared at the paper. "I never signed this. This is a forgery." "It's notarized, Harry," Kincaid said, stepping closer as the cops dragged Harrison toward the squad car. "You signed it the night of your bachelor party. You were quite intoxicated. Arthur told you it was just insurance for the venue. You didn't read it." Harrison felt the world tilt. He remembered that night. Arthur had bought the whiskey. Arthur had toasted him. "Welcome to the family, son. Just sign this little liability waiver for the yacht." "He planned this," Harrison whispered, his face pressed against the cold glass of the police car window. "He planned this 10 years ago." Kincaid leaned down, tapping the glass. "Arthur plays the long game, Mr. Blackwood. You were just a temporary employee." As the police car pulled away, Harrison watched Kincaid take out a phone and make a call. He could imagine who was on the other end. Harrison Blackwood, the tech genius, the billionaire, the man who had just won his divorce, was heading to central booking with $0 in his pocket and a company he no longer owned. But the worst part? He knew Arthur wasn't done yet. This was just the opening move. The holding cell at The Tombs, the Manhattan detention complex, smelled of industrial bleach and unwashed bodies. It was a sensory shock for a man whose nostrils were accustomed to Italian leather and aged Scotch. Harrison sat on a steel bench, his custom-tailored Xenia suit wrinkled and stained with the coffee from the collision on the street. He had been allowed one phone call. He had dialed Beatrice Thorne, his shark of a lawyer, the woman he had paid $3 million in retainers over the last 5 years. "The number you have dialed has been disconnected or is no longer in service." He had tried Jessica next. It went straight to voicemail. Then a text message notification flashed on his phone before the officer confiscated it. "Jessica, my dad saw the news about the arrest. I can't be associated with this, Harry. Don't come to the condo. I changed the codes. Good luck." Now, sitting in the cell, Harrison stared at the graffiti scratched into the concrete floor. He wasn't just broke, he was radioactively toxic. "Blackwood?" A guard banged on the bars. "Lawyer." Harrison shot up. Thank God. He expected a high-powered fixer, someone sent by an old friend, or maybe a business associate who needed Vertex to survive. Instead, a frazzled-looking woman in a polyester blazer walked in. She looked about 25, clutching a stack of files so thick she could barely hold them. "I'm Sarah Jenkins," she said, not making eye contact. "Public defender. I'm assigned to your arraignment." "Public defender?" Harrison scoffed, his old arrogance flickering back to life. "I don't need a public defender. I need a corporate litigator. Do you know who I am?" "I know you're the guy charged with theft of services, resisting arrest, and," she flipped a page, "violating a restraining order." "Restraining order? I don't have a restraining order." "You do now," Sarah said, dropping a paper on the metal table. "Filed electronically by Claire Blackwood an hour ago. She claims you made threatening phone calls, something about destroying her and burning it all down." Harrison's jaw dropped. "I said I'd sue her father. That's not a threat to her safety." "In the state of New York, given your current emotional instability," the judge signed off on a temporary order of protection, which means if you get bail, you can't go within 500 feet of her, her residence, or any property owned by the Sterling Family Trust. "That's my apartment," Harrison yelled. "My office, my gym." "Technically," Sarah said, finally looking him in the eye with a pity that hurt more than the handcuffs. "Those are all Sterling properties now. Look, Mr. Blackwood, the DA is pushing for high bail because you're a flight risk. You have, or had, offshore accounts." "I have $0, Harrison hissed. "Arthur Sterling froze everything." "The court doesn't know that yet. They see a billionaire. They're going to ask for $2 million bail." Harrison slumped against the cold wall. "I can't pay it." Sarah sighed. "Then you're going to Rikers until trial, unless you have someone on the outside." Harrison thought of his contact list. 2,000 names. CEO of Google, senators, tech influencers. Who would pick up? They were all fair-weather friends. They worshipped success. They were allergic to failure. "There is one person," Harrison whispered, "but I don't have his number." "Name?" "Elias Sterling, Arthur's brother." Sarah paused. "The gambler? The guy who got disbarred in 2008? That's the one." "I can try to find him," Sarah said, packing up her files. "But Mr. Blackwood, don't get your hopes up. When a shark like Arthur Sterling decides to eat you, he doesn't leave scraps." Harrison spent the night in the cell. He didn't sleep. He replayed the last 10 years of his life. Every success, every breakthrough, every magazine cover. Had it all been allowed? Had he been playing with an unplugged controller while Arthur played the game? At 4 a.m., a guard unlocked the cell. "Blackwood," Bond posted. Harrison blinked. "Who?" "Didn't say. Just get your stuff and get out." Harrison walked out of the precinct into the pre-dawn grey of Chinatown. He expected Elias. Instead, a black town car was waiting. The window rolled down. It wasn't Elias. It wasn't Jessica. It was Claire. She looked impeccable, wearing a cashmere coat and sunglasses despite the darkness. She didn't look at him. She looked straight ahead. "Get in, Harrison." He hesitated. "You have a restraining order against me." "I'm waiving it for 10 minutes. Get in." Harrison climbed into the back seat. The leather was warm. The car smelled of her perfume, lavender, and old money. "Did you bail me out?" he asked, his voice raspy. "Daddy wanted you to rot," Claire said softly. "But I thought that was gauche. Besides, We need you to sign one last thing." She held out a tablet. "What is it?" "A non-disclosure agreement. And a confession." "Confession to what?" "Embezzlement," Claire said, turning to look at him finally. Her blue eyes were ice cold. "Vertex has been bleeding money for 3 years, Harry. Millions siphoned into shell companies. Daddy found the trail." "I never stole a dime," Harrison shouted. "That was Greg, or your father, framing me." "It doesn't matter what is true," Claire said, her voice devoid of emotion. "It matters what the paper trail says. The accounts are in your name. The IP signatures are yours. If you sign this, admitting to mismanagement, Daddy will drop the civil suits. You won't go to federal prison. You'll just be broke and disgraced." "And if I don't sign?" "Then the FBI gets the file at 9 on Abusuzu a.m. And you know Daddy. He owns the judges, but he also has friends in the bureau." Harrison looked at the tablet. It was a complete surrender, an admission that he was a fraud, a thief, a failure. It would destroy his reputation forever. He would never work in tech again. "Why, Claire?" he asked, tears pricking his eyes. "I loved you. Once." "You loved the access, Harry," she said. "You loved that I was a sterling. You never looked at me. You looked through me to see my father's checkbook." She tapped the screen. "Sign it. Save yourself." Harrison stared at the glowing screen. He looked at his shaking hand. Then he laughed, a low, dry chuckle. "No." Claire's eyebrows rose. "Excuse me?" "No," Harrison said, opening the car door. "I'm not signing it. Send the FBI, send the Marines, I don't care. You're choosing prison?" "I'm choosing war," Harrison said. He stepped out onto the curb. "Tell Arthur I'm not just the guy who signed the papers anymore. I'm the guy who wrote the source code. And he forgot one thing. I know where the bodies are buried because I dug the graves, even if I didn't know who was going in them." He slammed the door. The Lincoln sped away. Harrison stood alone on the street. He had nothing. But for the first time in 24 hours, he wasn't afraid. He was angry, and anger was fuel. He turned and walked toward the subway. He still didn't have money, but he knew how to pick a lock. He was going to find Elias Sterling. Elias Sterling lived in a place that looked like it had been bombed during the Carter administration. It was a walk-up in Hell's Kitchen, above a failing dim-sum restaurant. Harrison banged on the door for 10 minutes before it opened. Elias looked like Arthur's reflection in a funhouse mirror. Where Arthur was polished and sharp, Elias was jagged and worn. He wore a stained bathrobe and smoked a cigar that smelled like burning tires. "Harrison Blackwood," Elias grunted. "I saw on the news you were in jail. Did you break out?" "I got bailed out by your niece." Elias let out a wheezing laugh and stepped aside. "Come in. Don't step on the cat. I don't have a cat, but the rats are big enough to count." The apartment was a chaotic mess of old newspapers, horse racing stubs, and surprisingly, high-end server racks humming in the corner. "You have a server farm in your kitchen?" Harrison asked, stepping over a stack of pizza boxes. "I mine crypto," Elias said, pouring 2 glasses of cheap bourbon. "It's the only money Arthur can't touch. So why are you here? You want to cry about how the old man took your toy company away?" "He didn't just take it. He framed me for embezzlement. They're going to send me to federal prison, Elias. I need to know how to stop him." Elias sat in a torn leather armchair. "You can't stop Arthur. He's a force of nature. He's been eating people since the 80s. You were just an appetizer." "I know the code," Harrison said, leaning forward. "I built Vertex, the core algorithm, the Nexus protocol. It connects global banking APIs. That's why the company is worth billions. And I built a kill switch." Elias stopped drinking. He looked at Harrison with new interest. "A kill switch? In the Nexus protocol?" Yes, a line of code buried in the kernel. If I execute it, Vertex stops talking to the banks. The latency goes from milliseconds to minutes. The stock crashes. The clients, JP Morgan, Goldman, they'll sue Sterling Holdings into oblivion. It destroys the company, but it takes Arthur down with it. Mutually assured destruction, Elias mused. I like it. So why haven't you done it? I need access. They locked me out of the system. My biometrics are scrubbed. I need a hardware access point. Elias stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the grime of the city. Arthur keeps the physical backups in a facility in New Jersey, the Iron Mountain of the East Coast. It's a fortress. Biometric scanners, armed guards, air-gapped servers. I can get in, Harrison said, but I need gear. I need a spoofer for the hand geometry reader. I need a jammer for the silent alarms. And I need a car. Elias turned back. And why should I help you? If this goes south, Arthur will find me. He'll finish what he started 20 years ago. Because, Harrison said, his voice hard. If I take Arthur down, the Sterling Trust dissolves. The assets get liquidated. And as the only surviving brother, I get half, Elias finished. His eyes gleamed. Greed, Harrison realized, ran in the family blood. Help me, Elias, let's kill the king. Elias grinned, revealing yellow teeth. I know a guy in Queens who sells surplus military gear. Get your coat, Harry. We're going shopping. 3 days later, Harrison lay on his stomach in the tall grass outside the Sterling Data Solutions facility in Paramus, New Jersey. It was raining, a cold, miserable drizzle that soaked through his black tactical gear, bought from an army surplus store. Elias was in a van a mile away, monitoring the police frequencies. Earpiece. Shift change in 2 minutes, Harry. The camera on the south wall has a 3-second lag when it resets. You have to move then. Copy, Harrison whispered. He wasn't a spy. He was a coder. His heart was hammering so hard he thought the guards might hear it. But he had no choice. The FBI indictment had been unsealed that morning. He was officially a fugitive. The camera light blinked red, then green, then off. Harrison sprinted. He reached the perimeter fence, threw his backpack over, and scaled it. He landed hard on the wet asphalt, rolling to absorb the impact. Earpiece. You're in the blind spot. Door is 50 yards to your left. Use the spoofer. Harrison ran to the steel maintenance door. He pulled out the device Elias had built, a clunky box of wires and a stolen RFID chip. He held it against the card reader. Beep, beep, beep. Nothing. It's not working, Elias. Earpiece. Rotate the frequency. Arthur probably updated the encryption keys. Harrison turned the dial. Sweat mixed with rain on his face. Click. Green light. He slipped inside. The facility was cold and hummed with the sound of 1,000 server fans. It was a cathedral of data. Rows and rows of black towers with blinking blue lights. I'm in, Harrison said, heading to the main terminal. He navigated the maze of racks. He knew the layout because he had designed the schematics 5 years ago. He reached the central console, a standalone terminal isolated from the internet. This was the brain of Vertex. He sat down and typed. Command. Initiate system override. Password. His old master password. Access denied. He changed the root password. Harrison cursed. Earpiece. Try the back door, the one you told me about. Harrison opened the command line interface. He typed in a string of code that looked like gibberish to anyone else. It was a sequence based on the Fibonacci numbers, his signature. System. Backdoor accessed. Welcome, user 0. I'm in, Harrison breathed. I have root access. He prepared the kill switch command. Delete. From system core. His finger hovered over the enter key. This was it. 5 years of work. His legacy. His genius. all of it gone in a second. But Arthur would be ruined. Suddenly, the terminal screen flickered. A text window popped up. System message. Hello, Harrison. Harrison froze. He didn't type that. System message. I've been waiting for you to log in. Elias? Harrison whispered. Are you typing this? Earpiece. Typing what? I'm just watching the police scanner. Why? Harrison stared at the screen. System message. Turn around. Harrison spun the chair around. Standing at the end of the server aisle, holding a sleek silver pistol, wasn't Arthur. It wasn't a guard. It was Claire. She was wearing a trench coat, dripping wet. She looked like a noir villain come to life. And she didn't look scared. She looked disappointed. How? Harrison asked. You really thought I didn't know about the Fibonacci back door? Claire asked, walking closer, the gun leveled at his chest. I was the one who suggested you use Fibonacci numbers for your encryption in bed that night. Remember? You thought I was just being cute. Harrison's mind raced. You don't know code. You paint watercolors. Claire laughed. It was a terrifying sound in the echoing room. Harrison, darling, I have a PhD in computational mathematics from MIT. I used my maiden name so nobody would know. I let you think you were the genius. It made you easier to control. Harrison stood up slowly. You built Vertex? I designed the architecture, Claire said. You were just the salesman. You were the pretty face we put on the magazine covers so the SEC wouldn't look too closely at the algorithm. What algorithm? The money laundering algorithm, Harry, Claire said, gesturing to the servers. Vertex isn't a tech company. It's a global washing machine for cartel money. Every transaction Vertex processes cleans 3 cents on the dollar. We move billions. Harrison felt sick. And I'm the CEO. My name is on everything. Exactly, Claire smiled. That's why we needed the divorce. We needed to separate you from the family assets before the DOJ investigation started. We needed a scapegoat, a greedy, arrogant ex-husband who stole the company and ran it into the ground. You set me up to take the fall for a criminal empire, Harrison realized. The weight of it crushed him. It wasn't just a bad divorce. It was a frame job of biblical proportions. And now, Claire said, raising the gun, you've broken into a secure facility. You're armed. You're a fugitive. If I shoot you, it's self-defense, and the investigation dies with you. Harrison looked at the gun. Then he looked at the screen behind him. The kill switch command was still blinking. Command, execute. You won't shoot me, Harrison said, bluffing. If you do, you'll never find the encryption key to the Cayman accounts. I changed it just now. He hadn't. But Claire hesitated. For a split second, the mathematician in her calculated the risk. You didn't, she said. Try me. Shoot me, and you lose $3 billion. Claire narrowed her eyes. Step away from the console. Harrison took a step back. Elias, he whispered. Plan B. Earpiece. Plan B? There is no plan B. Run! Harrison didn't run. He grabbed the fire extinguisher mounting on the rack next to him and hurled it, not at Claire, but at the main cooling pipe above the servers. Clang! The pipe burst. Pressurized liquid coolant, freezing cold and highly conductive, sprayed out like a fire hose, blasting directly onto the main server racks. Sparks flew. Smoke erupted. The sound of frying electronics filled the room. No! Claire screamed, lowering the gun to shield her face from the steam. Harrison dove into the darkness of the aisles. You idiot! Claire shrieked, firing blindly into the smoke. Bang! Bang! A bullet ricocheted off a server rack inches from Harrison's head. You're destroying the washing machine. That's the point! Harrison yelled back, crawling toward the emergency exit. The alarms were blaring now. The Helon gas system was hissing, preparing to suck the oxygen out of the room to kill the fire. Harrison kicked the emergency door open and tumbled out into the rainy night. He sprinted for the fence. He didn't look back. He just heard the sound of his billion-dollar legacy sizzling and popping as it melted down. He reached the van. "Drive! Drive!" Elias gunned the engine, and they peeled out onto the highway. "Did you do it?" Elias screamed. "Did you kill the code?" "I did better," Harrison panted, wiping soot from his face. "I melted the hardware, and I know the truth. It's not Arthur. It's Claire. She's the mastermind." Elias went pale. "Claire? No, Claire is the devil," Harrison said, "and she just tried to kill me." He looked at his phone. He had managed to snag one thing before he ran. He had plugged a USB drive into the terminal for 10 seconds while Claire was talking. "What's that?" Elias asked. "I didn't execute the kill switch," Harrison said, clutching the drive. "I executed a data dump. I have the ledger. I have the names of every cartel, every dirty politician, every bribe." Harrison looked out the window. The data center was glowing orange in the distance. "Now," Harrison said, a dark smile forming on his face. "We don't need a lawyer. We need a journalist." But as they drove into the night, Harrison's phone rang. It was Arthur Sterling. Harrison answered. "It's over, Arthur. I have the data." "Do you?" Arthur's voice was weak, wheezing. "Harrison, listen to me carefully. Claire, she's not working for me anymore. She hasn't for a year. Save it. No, listen." Arthur coughed. "She staged a hostile takeover of the family trust last month. She has me under house arrest at the estate. Harrison, you didn't just steal from a crime family. You stole from a woman who just overthrew her own father. If you have that drive, she won't send the police. She'll send the cleaners." Harrison went cold. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because," Arthur whispered, "she's coming for me next. Come to the estate, Harrison. Get me out, and I'll give you the password to decrypt that drive. Without me, that data is just useless noise." The line went dead. Harrison looked at Elias. "Change of plans," Harrison said. "We're not going to the press. We're going to the Sterling estate." "Are you crazy?" Elias shouted. "That's a fortress." "It's a prison," Harrison said. "And the warden just asked for a jailbreak." The Sterling estate in Sands Point was less a home and more a mausoleum for the living. It sat on a cliff overlooking the Long Island Sound, surrounded by 12-foot walls topped with razor wire. Elias cut the headlights of the van a mile out. "There's a service entrance near the coastline," he muttered, his hands gripping the wheel so tight his knuckles were white. "Arthur used it to smuggle art in the 90s. If it hasn't been sealed, we can get into the basement." "And if it is sealed?" Harrison asked, checking the magazine of the pistol he had taken from the guard in New Jersey. He had never fired a gun in anger before tonight. Now, it felt like an extension of his hand. "Then we knock on the front door and die," Elias said grimly. They hiked through the salt marsh, the mud sucking at their shoes. The rain had stopped, replaced by a thick, suffocating fog. They found the grate, rusted and covered in vines. Elias used a crowbar to pry it open. It groaned, a metal scream in the silence. They crawled through the damp tunnel, smelling of rot and seawater, until they reached the wine cellar. Harrison pushed the trapdoor open. The house was silent. Not the silence of sleep, but the silence of a held breath. "Arthur's study is on the second floor, East Wing," Elias whispered. They moved through the darkened hallways. The walls were lined with portraits of ancestors who looked down with judgmental sneers. They reached the double mahogany doors of the study. Harrison kicked the door open, gun raised. "Don't shoot," A raspy voice croaked from the leather armchair by the fireplace. Arthur Sterling was a shadow of the Titan Harrison remembered. He was hooked up to an oxygen tank, a blanket draped over his legs. He looked small, defeated. "You look terrible, Arthur," Harrison said, lowering the gun but not holstering it. "And you look like a criminal, Harrison." "It suits you," Arthur wheezed, managing a faint smile. He looked at Elias. "Hello, brother. I see you're still wearing cheap cologne." "Cut the pleasantries," Elias spat. "We're here for the encryption key. Give it to us, and we leave." "It's not a number," Arthur said, tapping his temple. "It's a biometric sequence. My voice, my retina. You can't just take it. You have to take me." Harrison walked to the window and peered through the curtains. The front lawn was empty, but he saw the glint of a sniper scope in the tree line. "We can't get you out, Arthur. You can't walk, and they have the perimeter locked down." "Claire is thorough," Arthur nodded. "She learned from the best." "Why did she turn on you?" Harrison asked. "She was your golden girl." Arthur sighed, a rattling sound in his chest. "Because I got old, Harrison. And in our world, weakness is a capital offense. She found out I was planning to sell the laundering operation to the Russians and retire. She didn't want the cash. She wanted the power. So she declared me incompetent, drugged me, and took the throne." Suddenly, the lights in the room flickered and died. "They know we're here," Elias hissed. "Arthur," Harrison said, crouching beside the chair, "I have the drive. I have the evidence that sends Claire away for life. But I need you to unlock it. Do it now." "I can't unlock it here. The decryption software is on a standalone mainframe in the panic room, behind the bookshelf." Harrison ran to the bookshelf and pulled the false book, a copy of The Art of War, naturally. The shelf swung open. Inside the steel-reinforced room, a single computer terminal hummed. "Get him in there," Harrison yelled to Elias. They dragged Arthur's chair into the panic room just as the study doors exploded inward. Wood splinters flew like shrapnel. Men in black tactical gear, Claire's cleaners, poured into the room. Harrison fired blindly through the doorway, hitting one in the vest. Elias slammed the panic room door shut. Thud! The electronic locks engaged. "We're trapped," Elias panted, sliding down the wall. "This is a steel coffin." "No," Arthur said, wheeling himself to the computer. "It's a broadcast station." Arthur placed his eye against the scanner. "Access granted." "Connect the USB drive, Harrison," Arthur commanded. Harrison plugged it in. The screen is filled with scrolling data. Bank accounts, assassination orders, bribes to senators. It was nuclear waste. "Decrypting," Arthur typed with shaking hands. "Done. The files are readable." "Now what?" Harrison asked. "We can't leave." "We don't leave," Arthur said. He looked at Harrison. "You wanted to be a tech disruptor, didn't you, son? Disrupt this." Arthur pulled up a hidden program. Project Glass House. "What is this?" "It's a direct uplink to the server nodes of every major news agency in New York. AP, Reuters, CNN, Fox. If I hit enter, this data doesn't just go to the FBI. It goes to the world, unfiltered, raw." "If you do that," Harrison said, realizing the gravity, "you destroy the Sterling name. You admit to everything. You go down as a monster." Arthur looked at the door. They could hear the cleaners setting up a drill to bore through the lock. "I'm already a monster, Harrison. I'm just choosing which monster kills me. I'd rather be destroyed by the truth than by my daughter." Arthur's finger hovered over the key. "Wait," Harrison said. He pulled out his phone. "If we do this, we do it my way." He pointed his phone camera at Arthur. "Live stream it. To YouTube. To Twitter. Right now. The news agencies can bury a story. The internet never forgets." Arthur chuckled. You always did understand marketing. Harrison hit Go Live. "My name is Harrison Blackwood," he said to the camera, his face dirty and bloody. "I am sitting with Arthur Sterling, and we are about to show you how the world really works." Arthur began to speak. He confessed. He named names. He explained the washing machine. Outside the panic room, the drilling stopped. "Why did they stop?" Elias whispered. Harrison looked at the view count on the stream. 10,000. 50,000. 1,000 viewers. "Because," Harrison said, "the whole world is watching. If they kill us now, they just confirm the story." But then, a voice came over the intercom system of the panic room. "Daddy," Claire's voice purred. "That's a very touching performance. But you forgot one thing." A hissing sound filled the small room. "Gas!" Elias choked. "She's pumping gas into the vents." "She doesn't care about the witnesses," Arthur coughed, his eyes watering. "She's burning the house down." "Upload the files," Harrison screamed. Arthur hit the enter key. Status: uploading 10%, 20%. The room began to fill with white, acrid smoke. Harrison felt his lungs burning. "It's too slow," Arthur wheezed. "The bandwidth." Harrison looked at the heavy server tower. "Elias, help me with the door. You can't open it. They'll shoot us. If we stay, we suffocate. If we open it, maybe the blast clears the smoke." Harrison overrode the lock. The heavy steel door hissed open. The hallway was empty. The mercenaries were gone. "Where are they?" Elias asked, coughing. "They're running," Harrison realized. "The police. Look." On the live stream chat, comments were flying. "The NYPD is outside. Helicopters. The FBI is breaching the gate. The upload hit 100%. Arthur slumped over the keyboard. "Arthur?" Harrison shook him. Arthur didn't move. The strain, the gas, the adrenaline. His heart had finally given out. The king was dead. "We have to go." Elias grabbed Harrison's arm. "The feds are coming. If they find us, we will spend 20 years in court explaining this." Harrison looked at the dead man, then at the computer screen where the files were now spreading like a virus across the globe. "Go," Harrison said. "I'm staying." "What?" "Someone has to hand the drive to the agents. Someone has to testify against her. Go, Elias. Take the van. Disappear." Elias hesitated, then nodded. "You're a fool, Harrison. But you're a brave fool." Elias ran into the shadows. Harrison Blackwood straightened his jacket. He wiped the blood from his lip. He walked out of the panic room, stepped over the debris, and walked down the grand staircase to the front door. He opened it. Blue and red lights blinded him. A helicopter roared overhead. Dozens of FBI agents had their weapons trained on his chest. And standing in the driveway, in handcuffs, screaming at a federal agent, was Claire. She looked up and saw Harrison. Her face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. Harrison didn't smile. He didn't smirk. He just stared at her. He raised his hands slowly in the air. "Harrison Blackwood," an agent shouted. "Get on your knees." Harrison knelt on the gravel. The cold rain began to fall again. He was going to prison, at least for a while. He had broken a dozen laws tonight. He was broke. He was homeless. But as he looked at Claire being shoved into the back of a squad car, thrashing and cursing, he realized something. He was free. 6 months later. The visitation room at the Federal Correctional Institution in Otisville was stark and grey. Harrison sat behind the plexiglass. He wore a beige jumpsuit now, not a Zegna suit. His hair was longer, and he looked tired, but his eyes were clear. On the other side of the glass sat Sarah Jenkins, the public defender who had first met him in the Tombs. She looked much more confident now. "The plea deal is finalized, Harrison," she said, opening a file. "Because of your cooperation, the testimony against Claire, and the data dump that took down 3 senators, and the Sinaloa cartel's banking arm, the DOJ is being generous. How generous? Harrison asked. Time served plus 5 years probation. You get out next Tuesday. Harrison let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for half a year. And Claire? Sarah smiled grimly. Life without parole. ADX Florence. She's in a supermax. It turns out the jury doesn't like it when you try to gas your own father. And the money? Harrison asked. Vertex? Vertex is dissolved. The assets were seized by the government. The sterling fortune is gone, Harrison. It's all gone. You're coming out with nothing. No penthouse. No Porsche. No billions. Harrison looked down at his hands. I don't have nothing? Oh? Sarah raised an eyebrow. You have a hidden account? No, Harrison said. I have a clean slate, and I have an idea. An idea? In here, Harrison tapped his head. I've been writing code on notepads, a new protocol, decentralized, unbreakable, transparent, no back doors for criminals, no kill switches for angry wives. Sarah laughed, closing the file. You never stop, do you? I'm an entrepreneur, Sarah. We don't stop. We just pivot. The following Tuesday, the heavy steel gates of the prison slid open. Harrison walked out, carrying a clear plastic bag with his civilian clothes, jeans and a hoodie. The sun was shining. The air smelled of pine and damp earth. A beat-up Ford sedan was waiting in the parking lot. The window rolled down. Elias was behind the wheel. He looked cleaner. He was wearing a Hawaiian shirt. Need a ride, kid? Elias grinned. Harrison threw his bag in the back and hopped in. Where are we going? Well, Elias said, putting the car in gear. I managed to salvage a few servers from the apartment before I ran. And I know a guy in Nevada who has a warehouse with cheap electricity. It's not much, but it's a start. Harrison looked out the window as the prison faded into the distance. He thought about the champagne toast at Le Coucou. He thought about the smirk he had when he walked out of divorce court. He had been a child then, a rich, arrogant child playing with loaded guns. He had lost the fortune. He had lost the status. He had lost the girl. But he had won the war. Drive, Harrison said, pulling a crumpled notebook from his pocket. I have some code I need to run. As the car disappeared down the highway, the camera pans up to the sky, blue and limitless. And that is the story of Harrison Blackwood, a man who thought he had everything, lost it all, and found something stronger in the ashes. It's a brutal reminder that in the game of power, the person holding the checkbook isn't always the one in control. It's the person holding the secrets. What do you guys think? Did Harrison deserve to lose the money, or did he earn a second chance? And be honest, would you have uploaded that data knowing you'd go to jail? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of a story, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories of corporate betrayal, high-stakes revenge, and twisted justice, hit subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.